Welcome to Inside the Plant, brought to you by United Prairie. This is the podcast where we break down what's happening in the field right now. Real agronomy insights, fertilizer market updates, and conversations with the people who are making decisions in agriculture every single day. I'm Josh Rund, and I'm the Employee Relations and Compliance Manager here at United Prairie, and I'll be your host on this podcast journey. A little bit about myself: I've been around Central Illinois agriculture my entire life. I grew up on our family farm outside of Tolono, which my dad still operates today. I went to Parkland College and then transferred to the University of Illinois, where I received a degree in agriculture education. I taught high school ag at Tri-Valley High School in Downs for 5 years before calling United Prairie home here about 12 years ago. Today, I live on our family farm just outside of Tolono with my wife and our 2 children. Our first podcast episode is going to be a conversation, and that conversation is going to center around agronomy and field conditions as we see them today, as we've really kicked up planting here in Central Illinois. My guest has also been around agriculture his entire life and is still very active on his family farming operation. Kyle Meece is our agronomy manager here at United Prairie and no stranger to podcasts. Kyle, I want to thank you for taking the time to be with me here today.
Josh, thanks again for having me on. As you mentioned, my name is Kyle Meece. I'm the agronomy manager here at United Prairie. Started with the company in 2006. I was running a machine and did a little bit of sales for about the first year and a half. Then actually transitioned out of the machine and worked full time in sales till about 2010. Left for a short stint, went to more of a corporate side of the business and just wasn't a big fan of that side of things. So was fortunate enough to come back late 2010 and we started the Dewey facility. Where I was a sales agronomist there, just working to build that business from the ground up. So up until about 5-6 years ago, I was a sales agronomist, then took over as the agronomy manager as my predecessor, Jeff Brown, retired, and really my direct responsibilities on a daily basis. I'm still working with a number of customers I've worked with for many, many years now, but handle a lot of our agronomic research and just really anything agronomy that any of our guys need within the locations, whether that be sales agronomists, whether that be our location managers, whether that be the upper management. Just trying to help them and anything that they need and growers from that standpoint just as well.
Perfect, Kyle. Thank you very much for that introduction. And I guess we'll just go ahead and dive right into this. And what would you characterize the start of the 2026 planting season across Illinois? How does that look right now to you in terms of soil fertility and the weather that we've had, the conditions that are happening not just in our country but around the world? From your agronomic perspective and your farmer perspective, what are you focused on? What are you getting out of the start of this season?
Yeah, you bet. So I think it's been interesting, for right here in East Central Illinois, there's been some guys that really started the planting season back at the late part of March. Then there's some that got in the first week of April. And then I would say last week, we saw just about everybody rolling. What's the focus right now? The focus is been predominantly soybeans, just looking at the environmental conditions we've been dealing with. And then you think about what's on guys' minds right now, and is it ideal? Is it time to plant? Is it too early? I mean, it was 20 years ago when I was in college, and what they would teach you then is, well, we're going to plant corn first, and then maybe we'll take a little break and then go planting beans. And what do we see now? Most everybody is just planting beans like crazy because of the response that we've seen the last number of years, getting them planted early, getting that much growth and development before we hit the summer solstice. So it's all attributed to yield. The most challenging thing as I look at previous seasons versus this season, man, the number one thing that stands out to me, Josh, is the wind. The wind has just been flat, brutal. I mean, last week was challenging. And, in our business, obviously we do a great deal of spraying, and it's been tough. It's been tough to even catch a break on a day where we can get something done. Even though the wind's blowing, it doesn't mean that the planters are going to slow down. And with some of the guys and the capabilities they have, whether it's multiple planters, whether it's high-speed planters, but it's nothing for a guy to plant a tremendous amount of acres in a day's time. And when we're not able to get out there and get them covered up because we do a lot of overlay on the soybeans, it just puts us behind. So that's been frustrating to some aspect. You ask, when we look at what's going on, worldwide, obviously a couple things. The conflict in Iran has created just Just a lot of questions, probably more than answers right now. And we're watching the input market. I know for most of us, you have most of your inputs taken care of, or, going into the 2026 growing season, but we're already thinking about the 2027 growing season. What does the early fill options look like this winter? When's the best time to traditionally buy fertilizer? It's when we're not thinking about it. For us in this industry, we're starting fills here right now already for 2027. We've watched the nitrogen market just go off the charts here ever since this conflict started. And then for those of you that don't have all your inputs in place, I'd highly encourage you to be talking to your sales agronomist, whether you're working with somebody from United Prairie or from another supplier. This just needs to be discussed, and there needs to be a plan in place. That's been unbelievably frustrating from a worldwide spectrum. The last thing I think that what we look at right now is, Central Illinois was dealing with one heck of a drought. We came out of the fall very dry. We had I'm not going to say a mild winter, probably had more snow than I've seen over the last number of years, but looking at the drought monitor, it wasn't more than a month ago, and we were 15 inches behind where we would like to be this time of year. Have we come out of that? We're getting darn close. The northern part of Piatt County and Champaign County, even as you get up into Ford and Iroquois, still a little bit drier there, but we're a heck of a lot better off than where we were, just 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I tell you what, if the weather and the rainfall is any indication, my yard is green and it's growing. I've already mowed twice, and the dandelions are driving me crazy out there too. So I always feel like if my yard's looking good, and my plants in my yard are looking good, which my bulbs came up and they looked really great this year, and all of my perennials came back really strong even after that drought over the winter time. I feel like the recovery, like you said, in the past week has been pretty good. I'm hoping the crops respond just like kind of some of my perennials did in my own yard.
Yeah,
So
that sounds like you need to talk to somebody about getting the dandelions addressed in your yard. If only you knew somebody that could assist with that.
yeah, I'm always looking for a good agronomy person, but I'm just struggling here, even though I probably got one right next to me in my office. Yeah, so I'm always at Costco trying to find the next latest and greatest thing to throw on my yard. So it's
Well,
always a plus.
you talk about the yards and the homeowners, and one of the things that I think a lot of them were dealing with here over this past weekend. What's today? Today is Monday, the April 20th, and what did we wake up to this morning? We woke up to a lot of frost on the ground, and I've had a number of phone calls a day from growers that were out there in that late March window, early April. They got beans out of the ground, and they're all wondering, am I okay? And it's very tough to tell right now. Obviously, you need to wait 5 to 7 days. But I'll tell you, when I got up this morning and I drove down the road about 2.5 miles away from home, I knew of a field of beans that were planted early and they were emerged. And I have one of those guns that can measure temperature, and I just went to the road ditch, and right at the bottom of the road ditch, grass road ditch, it was 24 degrees. As I moved up to the top of the road ditch, it was 28, 29 degrees. And then as I moved off into the field a little bit, this is a conventional till-based field, but it was about 31, 32 degrees. So just because we have a frost doesn't mean that we necessarily hurt our beans. Now, could we see some effects from it? I would say we're 100% going to see something. Do I think we killed those beans? If history says anything, what we've noticed is if you're 28 degrees from a 2, 3, 4 hour time period consistently, that's what can really kill that bean off. But we have auxiliary buds. There's some things that could help them generate back, but I think we're going to be okay from this one. I say I think because I want to scout stuff in it, and in another 5 to 7 days just to see where we're at. But I think for those of you that are dealing and kind of concerned with some of this, I wouldn't get overly concerned. I'd concentrate on your lowest areas and your wettest areas, but as first and foremost on your scouting regiment. But just keep in mind, the temperatures there at the soil surface versus what they are in the road ditch or in the low-lying areas are drastically different.
Okay, good. So that's a great thing to mention, because people don't. I wouldn't think about that. I wouldn't think about. I hear Jacob Dickey on the news tell me that there's going to be a frost warning and I need to cover my sensitive plants, and I do. I think about the crop conditions and the field conditions, but I guess just in my head, I don't think about the temperature being that much different inside the center of that field versus what it's going to be in my yard or on the hood of my truck, when I come out and there's a little bit of frost in there. So that's a good perspective to have. And so speaking of some of those temperature swings, and we've seen, I feel like a lot of those is this year's weather temperature swings and the lack of moisture that we got late and finally got some moisture late. Is this, looking back at the years of you farming and being involved in agronomy and agriculture, is this something that's super rare, or is this something that just kind of comes in waves?
Yeah, I don't think it's something super rare. It just seems to be pretty consistent anymore. And I think that's what's, as growers and even as an agronomist myself, or our sales agronomists or our seed specialists making recommendations, I think this is why some of the decisions that we're making today when it comes to, what crop are we planting right now, what sort of tillage conditions are we planting in. I mean, before we took this, we started on this podcast, I had a call from a grower who was asking me about his no-till beans, if it felt like it was time that he would be safe to go ahead and do those. And I told him I do feel like it's time. No-till ground is traditionally a little wetter, it's a little cooler, so we got to be a little bit more patient. But we're also loading up these soybeans with a lot of treatment packages, and it's not just an F&I, and I hate saying F&I because it's a fungicide and insecticide, but I like to be more specific of what we are applying on the beans, and because it's very different than I feel like other suppliers maybe are providing. We do a lot of research on that, but we aren't just putting a fungicide and an insecticide on, but we're looking at stimulants that can help that plant get up and out of the ground. We're helping with a fertility standpoint to get them up and out of the ground. Some additional treatments. So that's what makes these beans also a little bit more resilient to handle the early planting conditions. And it's been crazy. I mean, they can lay in the ground for many, many weeks and still come up. I think the earliest, when I think back, and I can't remember what year it was, the earliest I ever planted beans was on December 4th. I had some beans left over, and I have a 1 acre piece in front of my house. And I remember going over, getting the 4-row planter. My dad's like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm going to go plant some beans." And up until about as the 15th of March, those beans were germinating. They were getting ready to come out of the soil. And then we saw 3 snows. We had like a snow every other week from that point forward, and they didn't survive. But look what they did survive. It's a lot of months on super cold temperatures with a strong treatment package, and they would have come out of the ground had it not been. Well, they did come out of the ground, and then it snowed 3 times.
I tell you what, if one thing that I've learned about the resiliency of our crops and the genetics that we have here with our crops is that whether it's a drought, these colder temperatures, well, when we'll see these colder temperatures, what they do, I haven't really seen that too much, but lack of rainfall, in some years, even with an abundance of rainfall, these genetics are resilient. I mean, they just, as soon as we think that we're going to have a bad year with corn or a bad year with bean yields, all of a sudden they end up being still amazing. And so that always surprises me. I feel like is we don't think about the genetics and the time that goes into creating that product, and how resilient they truly are. And so you're talking about being in the planter and being out there early. What, with you being on your farm and you're out there in the planter or talking with your brother about what's going on at Meece Farms, what's top of mind for you right now out there in the field when you're in that planter?
For our conversations right now, I mean, it's just making sure that we execute the plan that we started putting together honestly at the 2025 beginning of planting season. And I historically, we're planting in 2025. I'm already thinking about 2026, and here we are planting 2026, and I'm already thinking about things that we can do differently in 2027. But you put all that time and effort in, whether it's you doing it yourself, whether it's you working with your United Prairie seed specialist or sales agronomist or some other partner within your organization, you want to execute that thing to the fullest. And it's so easy to just get diverted from the plan and the task at hand. And I find that all the time. I mean, I know last week was a prime example. We had plans. Mitch Holmes, one of our seed specialists, he had convinced us to plant the 2.5 bean. He says, "You need to get out there and plant this 2.5." Well, we weren't going to be at the field that did the 2.5, but I'm like, we're going to put this here. This is what it was planned for. So you catered your day to make sure that happened and that you started on that maturity, then you work your way through. And I know there's times where we're sitting there and you just dump what's in the planter. Somebody's going back, they're getting seed, just load it on, let's go. we try to stay pretty focused on that, and I encourage others of you to try to do the same thing, because again, you execute so much, you spend so much time on a plan that you want to execute and follow through in the end. There's a reason you develop it. Why mess it up after day one? So those are some of the conversations that we're having. The other thing right now is we're running some different variable rate planning scripts. Aaron Grody, who's our GIS specialist, he's created some scripts for us based off of many, many years of historical yield data, coupling that in with some other metrics that I'm looking at kind of a more advanced basis. So that's the thing. Once we can get back in the field, we're going to execute some of those and really range our populations from as low as 100,000 to as high as maybe 160, 165. And I think that's where we're going to stick, at least at this timing. As we get later, we may make some adjustments.
Awesome. That's great. Well, and that's a lot to think about when you're sitting out there in the planter. But like you said, all you got is time when you're out there too. So time in your phone, which for you is always ringing off the hook. So, and you are probably a self-proclaimed agronomy nerd. You're passionate about this. And I think it comes out in a lot of the times. This probably isn't going to be the first podcast people have heard you on, and it won't be the last, because you're passionate about what you do and you're a nerd about it, which is a good thing for us. But what is something that has happened or come out that's excited you recently, whether that's somebody coming in and bringing something to your office, a new product or a new feature of something, or a promise that was given that you're looking forward to seeing if that promise delivers? What's something that's come through that you feel like you're excited about? What do you plan to do with that product?
No, first of all, thanks for the kind words, Josh. I'm getting a little emotional because you never say nice things to me, so I'll work my way through that. But we are a very research oriented company, and I dive in so deep on some stuff. It's almost too much at times, but I think we all always have to stay open minded. We always got to keep our eyes open of what are the new things to come. And I do. I get phone calls on a daily basis, or I get people stopping by my office, and I'm kind of privy to what's the new and up and coming stuff that's in that pipeline. And a lot of them are asking me, "Hey, will you take a look at this? Look at this from a replicated basis." So again, you feel privileged to do that, and I feel even more privileged that I get to look at it and share it with listeners like who's ever listening to this and our growers. I think the easy out for this answer would be, biologicals. And I know that's just something I'm not saying we're tired of hearing of it, but it's just something that we're hearing over and over again and trying to get our head wrapped around. I think what's probably even more fascinating to me is there's some companies that have been coming out that they're really looking at efficiency of certain products. And for those that made it to the winter meeting this year, the the title of my presentation was, "Are we as efficient as we think we are?" And that kind of went on multiple directions. But with what's happening overseas right now and what we're looking at the input market, I think what's on our mind right now is number one, how can we tighten the belt up a little bit and tighten the budget up some, but still obtain the yields that not only we're looking for, but our landowners and just everybody within the operation needs to have to make this a sustainable, job and income source. And so as I look at some of the new things that are coming out, I am excited to look as how can we make nitrogen more efficient? How can we make those applications, can we get by with less? Do we need to be putting on the fertility that we are putting on, or are there other mechanisms that we can introduce that unlock some of the kind of hidden potential that's in our soil types and our soil profiles here in East Central Illinois? I'm sure for many of you, that's probably odd to hear that from somebody who's sold fertilizer and chemical their whole lives, because that's how we generate our revenue. It's no secret, but I think we better be keeping an eye on what other mechanisms are out there to achieve some of these goals. And I'm not going to be afraid to try some things. The biggest thing it's probably going to do is going to take me out of a comfort zone. I mean, a zone that I am not comfortable in doing, but I think that we need to be in that zone if we're going to actually learn and see the true either benefit or honestly, this sounds bad, but or non-benefit that it brings to us. So, specific wise, I think as I get into the season, I'll elaborate a little bit more. I know our whole sales team, I've tasked each one of them. We have 6 key protocols that we're working on. So I'm going to have hopefully 20 to 25 different data points across the whole season, across every geographic region that we work in, so that I can share that data at the end of the season in our trial results book, more than just what's going on in the innovation farm, either here locally or our little farm down at Cowden.
Awesome. That's perfect. Well, and kind of what you said, it is amazing to me to think about the amount of money the United Prairie spends to potentially make less money. With our investments in the See and Spray technology that we've put into with John Deere, with nutrient innovation techniques that you're researching at your farm, and then going to our growers with that information that you don't maybe have to put on a blanket application of fertilizer. You don't need these XYZ chemicals. We can get by with a little bit less based on your soil tests. I dare people to find another industry that's doing as much work to make less money than we are. And it's because we're about the grower. We're about the grower, supporting the American farmer, and making sure that we take care of them, because at the end of the day, they're going to take care of us if we do a good job of that. So,
yeah, I mean, Josh, I just a second on that. I mean, I agree. And I want everyone to know and understand this. Like, I realize there's going to be a lot of things thrown at you going through this 26 season or 27, maybe the next seasons to come. Take your time in figuring some of these out. That's the one thing. Like, you can't rush into something. And that's what's so hard for me even to make some of the recommendations on these new products that we're dealing with. Is I've got some of these products that I'm in my 3rd year's worth of testing, and I haven't hardly talked about it to anybody, because I got to have proof of concept. Everyone always wants to come into my office and bring me a product and say it works. And I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm just saying we need multi-years of data to see if it works here and here locally. So don't just go cold turkey and think, hey, I'm going to cut my fertilizer back to nothing, or I'm going to cut it back 50%. Your crops and your soils are not ready for that. It'd be like, myself, I guess, if, again, poor analogy, but if I was hooked on some sort of drug and I all of a sudden just went cold turkey on day one, I don't think my body would respond real well. There's a transition period that has to happen, and just know that all of us here at United Prairie are working on that. We're wanting to work on that in conjunction with you to make sure we're making the right recommendations from the start.
Yeah, I think people have done that before. I mean, the human body is not that much differently, honestly, than our soils are. Our human body needs nutrients, we need water, we need sustenance to survive, and we put the wrong things in our body, we get bad results. But if we eat clean and healthy, and we do a good job taking care of ourselves and monitoring our health, that pays off in dividends later on. And so doing the same thing with our soils is good. Like you said, cutting cold turkey on caffeine, or if I cut coffee out of my morning, I would be a pretty annoying dude by the middle of the day, more annoying than I already am. So yeah, being careful and cutting through things, not doing something drastic is an important lesson to learn. And you mentioned our innovation farm a couple times here, and I want to give our listeners here an opportunity to think about, if someone's listening to this podcast for the first time and this is their first United Prairie experience, give us in a nutshell, Kyle, what is the innovation farm, and how is that different than other quote unquote innovation farms that they might see out there?
You betcha. Yeah. So one thing that we took upon ourselves, this has probably been 10, 15 years ago, is we wanted some localized data. And I used to argue this myself when I was first getting started in the business. Is like, these little 20 foot by 50 foot long or 300 foot long plots, they don't mean anything to me. I want a real world experience, a real field experience. The thing is, when you're testing some of this stuff that's experimentals, like, you need very tight knit, not a lot of variables. Just, I want to see consistency with that. So our innovation farm is a 60-acre farm that's right west of our headquarters here at Tolono, about a mile and a half. It consists of, roughly not quite 30 acres of corn, 30 acres of soybeans, and it's made for replicated data. Some may drive by that farm and be like, it looks like there's some variability out there. And there is variability out it. The farm also almost looks like a bowl to some extent. You got some high ground on one end, you got some low ground in the middle, then it kind of levels off. That's actually ideal for what I'm doing, especially, if I'm in something that I want to measure, okay, is stress mitigation. Well, you get to the tougher part of the farm, that's where we're going to test some stress mitigation products. If I'm looking at some things with potential nutrient loss or nitrogen loss, maybe the middle of the farm would be my higher opportunity there. But the farm is pattern tiled, and a lot of those are 500-foot long by 20-foot replicated strips across the field. And every year, I would say on average, we probably have anywhere from 130 to 160 different trials that are going on out there. And at the end of the season, we harvest all that. We weigh wagon every single trial, and I compile all that data and put it into our trial results book that we do every single year, and we've done for a number of years. In addition to that farm, we're also trying to take data from a real field standpoint. And I mentioned earlier, just we've got 6 key protocols I got the sales team working on this coming spring. A lot of that has been derived from, hey, we saw performance in year 1 on the innovation farm, maybe in year 2. Now let's take it to a larger scale basis. And that's how we go about deciding if we want to bring a product to market, or that we need to talk about it with a listener or grower like yourself. It's going to be at a minimum 3 years. So that's just, there's a lot of companies that have that, a lot of companies doing research. We've tried to do it better than most, and I feel like we've been pretty successful, but always room for improvement, and we're always looking for suggestions of what things guys and gals out there would like to see.
Awesome. That's great. Well, once again, the multi-year truthing of data, I think, is super important, and something that's a hallmark of our innovation farm is we collect data points not just at the farm, but we see success, then we expand and we put it at different growers, and not just here around Tolono. We're trying these things down in Cowden, up at Crescent City, over at outside of Watsika. We're over by Danvers, even over a little bit in Indiana. Probably we're testing it all over East Central Illinois soils to make sure that it's a good product and viable for our growers, and we're getting data points on that, multiple years of data points on that, to make sure that makes a difference. And so if you're not familiar with United Prairie and you're not familiar with our innovation farm, that gives you a good insight into what goes on, the trials that go out there, and the amount of information that we get out of those trials. And we usually do a field day towards the end of summer, usually at the beginning, first week or 2 of August. We'll host a field day out at our innovation farm. And then we do a data collection, and then in the wintertime, usually at the beginning, mid of January, we'll have a kind of an agronomy overview of our trial results. And Kyle does a great job, creates a massive book that we put out there with all of the data, all of the information from those trials. Very informative for not just our growers, but for any grower in East Central Illinois, which I always go back to the show that's at Gordyville, the Midwest Ag Expo. I walk around the Midwest Ag Expo when we're down there in January, and there's always some guy from South Dakota or Montana that's sitting there trying to sell farmers a product that he's only tried out in South Dakota and Montana. And it's killing it there. It's doing an awesome job. And my question to him is always, well, what's your East Central Illinois, or just even Midwest Illinois data that you've got? Well, we haven't done that yet. And so it's like that's where our innovation farm, I think, shines when it comes to some of this. Is we're kind of that block for the grower of, you've got a lot of noise over here, we're going to truth that data for you to give you a good product there too. So that's awesome. I love our innovation farm. It's a big hallmark, I think, of what we do here at United Prairie, what sets us apart in our industry. So Kyle, with that, we're probably coming to a close here on the podcast. I've kept you in here long enough, closed door with me, more uncomfortable than he probably wants to be. So with this, is there something, with this being our first podcast, our first show, our first time doing this, something final thoughts you want to leave with our growers as of right now with them?
Hey, nothing specific. I think Josh and I are trying this out. Our general manager, Kurt Miller, was all about trying some of this on the podcast side of things. I know that there's a lot of information that gets into your hands and into your ears, especially when you're sitting in a tractor or in a sprayer or in a tillage tractor, whatever, via a podcast. So I think for me, feedback is everything, and don't hesitate, whether it's positive or negative, reach out to us. We want to know what's content that you want to hear. I don't want to always assume that I know what you're wanting to listen to, but I think there's some key things as we go through this growing season, the harvest season, that we can continue to kind of dive into a little bit deeper. And I can dive as deep as we want or as little as we want. But I think what it's probably going to do is I hope it gets your mind thinking first and foremost, and I hope it generates some more questions. And again, don't hesitate to reach out to either myself or any of our sales agronomists, seed specialists. That's what we're here for. And we try to have a unified message when it comes to the things that we're talking about, the things that we're recommending, and the products that we're looking at. So I hope that any of my team or myself can answer those questions for you. And if we don't know them, we're going to figure them out.
Awesome. Well, that's great information. Well, I want to thank Kyle Meece, our agronomy manager, for being here with me today and being on our first podcast, with Inside the Plant. And once again, my name is Josh Rund, and look forward to continuing episodes of this podcast. And just like Kyle said, if there's a topic or something that you would like for me or our company to hit on in a podcast, please send an email to myself, jrund@unitedprairie.com. You can get a hold of me through our website, social media, through Facebook, X, or any of those platforms that we're on. Send me a direct message. I get those, and I will look into that, and we'll get some answers for you if you've got a topic or something that's heavy or weighing on you. So once again, I thank you guys very much for listening. I want to thank Kyle for being my guest here today, and we wish you a very safe and successful planting season here, and look forward to continuing moving these forward in the future. So thank you.